There's a line in Little Women, the 1994 movie version, where a character says to Jo, "You should have been a lawyer, Miss March." To which Winona Ryder replies, "I should have been a great many things." And hoo boy, do I ever feel that line in my soul. It's always crazy to me that some people don't know what they want to do with their life, or don't have a ton of interests that they want to pursue from a very young age. Like freshman year, when I learned that some of my fellow students were undeclared majors, that was such a foreign concept to me. Because I always had the opposite problem, I suppose. Although, to be fair, it can manifest in the exact same way. Not knowing what you want to do with your life. I had so many interests, so many career fields or life paths I would have been fascinated to traverse, that my main issue was narrowing it down. And in fact, I didn't narrow it down, not really. I managed to shrink the vast landscape of options to just the entertainment industry, and then life did the rest of the narrowing down for me, and I ended up here as a YouTuber. Wahoo! No regrets. Yet. But there were so many other jobs or career paths that I wanted to pursue, that I wanted to at least try. And it's hard to say if I would have found any of them fulfilling, if any of them would have made me happy, per se. But I did find so many things fascinating. And that has not changed. I still wish I could try all of these jobs that have captured my interest at some point. If I could have simultaneously pursued all of my interests, I would have. It felt deeply unfair to me as a teenager that there was an expectation that I would choose one of these things and let go of the rest. It still feels unfair to me, but I say that with all possible recognition of what a champagne problem that is. The world is just full of so many interesting experiences one could have if given the opportunity. Even confined to the title work, there are still so many varied and curious options possible. How are we meant to choose just one? I don't know what it's like to not have a vast number of things you want to do with your life. Even wildly conflicting things that do not seem possible for one human being to accomplish. So I thought I'd talk about some of the jobs that I wanted, or some of the career paths that I considered pursuing and ultimately didn't. Just, you know, for the fun of it. And I'd be interested to know, in an alternate universe, in a parallel life, what is the career you might have had? Like, what's the main thing that stands out as the thing you could be doing right now rather than what you are doing? For better or for worse. Maybe it's the thing you really wish you had pursued or are still hoping to pursue. Maybe it's something you're super glad you didn't pursue because you know now that it wouldn't have been a great choice. It's just so interesting to me. There are so many lives I could have lived, and this is the one I ended up with. Why? Well, big picture, like, coincidence? Small picture, because of heaps and piles of tiny decisions made throughout my entire existence, not just by me. But that is waxing philosophical. I promise I just wanted to have a light and fun chat about careers I was once interested in. What's the wildest dream job that you ever had, maybe when you were a little kid? One of the first jobs I remember wanting to pursue was acting. Like, that goes way back in my childhood, particularly because I wanted to act as a child. I wanted to start that career at as young an age as possible. That did not pan out. But that was the main contributing factor to my degree in musical theater, even if I realized pretty quickly after arriving at university at the ripe old age of 18 that I was not cut out for a life of auditions and rejection. It was an old and deep desire, though, acting, and one that has technically not gone away. In one of the many classes I took for that theater degree, I'd assume one of the actual acting ones, we sat in a circle on the stage and talked about why we wanted to act. I always think that's a more interesting question. Why do you want to act, rather than why do you want to be an actor? And yes, that's being very pedantic. But they do mean slightly different things. 'Tis nuance. We were going around the circle, giving our reasons. I remember absolutely nothing that anyone else said, because I was too busy trying to come up with what I would say, which is what always happens when you have to answer a question in a circle like that. You can't really listen until after you've shared. And I was lightly panicking inside because I didn't have a prepared answer for this question. But then the spotlight, metaphorically, landed upon me and I realized that I did have an answer to this question because I just had very real feelings about it that, were there without me having to prepare them. Wild. And it was this exact thing that this whole conversation is about. There are so many lives I want to live, and the reality is that you can't. Like, sure, maybe you'll get to completely switch careers at some point in your life. Maybe you'll get to try a whole bunch of different jobs. You can, in fact, do more than one thing with your life, no matter what societal expectations tell you. And I am personally a huge advocate for not tying yourself down to one thing and limiting your desire to explore and learn. But the reality is that I would never be able to live as many lives as I dreamed of living. I would never be able to experience as many different lifestyles as I was curious about. I would never be able to pursue all the career paths that fascinated me, regardless of how varied I was able to make my life. So for me, the big standout reason for wanting to act, and obviously I had other reasons, I kind of require myself to have more than one reason for everything, was that in playing a role, in playing a different person, I'd briefly get to experience a different life. However false or pretend it was, I'd get to put myself in the shoes of another character's story and walk in that for a bit. I would have the opportunity to experience stories that I could never experience in my real life simply because there is a limited amount of story any one life can contain. Acting felt like this golden opportunity to live more than one life within your life. It was a loophole, and I loved that, and I wanted to take advantage of that. And I think it's because this background desire has never gone away, the desire to live a million lives and experience a million stories and do a million things, that my desire to act has never completely gone away, no matter how thoroughly I have decided to not officially pursue that career. Then of course there were all the big dreams of childhood. I'm sure we all have our own versions of these. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be the president. Yeah, no, not for me. Mine were pretty much all performance-based. Acting was kind of one, although it was a little deeper and more complex of a desire in my 8-year-old brain. Then there was modeling. I actually had the teeny-tiniest bit of a childhood modeling career. Wahoo! I had to have been like 4 or 5 years old, and I think I've talked about this in a video before, but yeah, my mom somehow took all of my siblings, to this modeling thing for a dog shampoo brand. They gave us cute clothes, and they paired us up with dogs, and then they took photos of us, and I ended up on the front of a bottle of dog shampoo, along with a beautiful golden retriever named Peaches. And that was the end of my modeling career, but I assume that that's the experience that kept me dreaming about modeling for many, many years to come. You get cute clothes, you get to pet dogs, there's a big table of food. That's what I thought modeling was. Ice skating hit me hard after going to see Disney on Ice. Not only was there the performance aspect of it, the pretty costumes, being on stage, being a princess, but also ice skating looked like flying to me, and I loved anything that puts the wind in my hair. Still do. I remember after seeing the show, I managed to find a bit of alone time in the bedroom, which was rare because our house was very full, and I laid on the floor and pretended to ice skate. Like, I closed my eyes and I made the motions with my feet, and I just imagined that I was flying across the ice. I had a very good imagination. And then the first time I actually went ice skating, which was probably in like 5th or 6th grade, I found it incredibly painful. I had no natural talent for it. All my dreams of a career in ice skating went flying out the window. Then there was singing. Briefly, there was singing. This was another thing like acting that I wanted to do as a kid. This dream infiltrated the system after I saw bands like Jump 5, or there was this Christian group called, I think, NRG, that was literally made up of like 3 12-year-olds, young kids. And I was like, oh dang, you can be a child and a professional singer at the same time? I want to do that. Again, a lot of my childhood dreams were based in my simple desire to work. I wanted to be a working child. Playtime was over, or at least I wished it was. There was always an underlying desire to run away and join the circus, which was expanded upon by an episode of the PBS show Popular Mechanics for Kids, where they interviewed people from this rather new at the time company, Cirque du Soleil. We had gone to the Ringling Brothers Circus at some point in my childhood, and I was fascinated by that as well. But all of this stuff with the wires and the silks and the flying through the air, at that time, it was pretty new and quite different from what you would see at a more traditional circus. I was enthralled, especially because they also visited a circus school during that episode. I remember this shot of kids walking out of their classroom on their hands to go train. I remember thinking, my God, I could be doing that. And here I am walking around on my 2 feet like a total dweeb. Speaking of being inspired by PBS, y'all, PBS matters. There was an episode of Reading Rainbow all about Broadway. So, you know, that was my favorite episode. And I think that was my first introduction to theater, like theater in a big way, professional theater. A friend took me to see the Lion King musical when I was in junior high, but prior to that, I think I had only ever seen one play, one thing on stage that wasn't our ballet recitals. It was Cheaper by the Dozen, done by the local homeschool theater group that my little sister would end up joining, like, over a decade later. So my dreams of acting were always more focused on movies and TV, because that's what I mostly saw, that's what I had access to. Mostly movies, honestly, because we weren't really allowed to watch TV. But that episode of Reading Rainbow where they interviewed the woman who was playing Grisabella in Cats on Broadway, they showed her getting ready and they showed some clips from the show. Oh, that fired up something inside me. I actually have a very nostalgic love for the show Cats to this day, even though I simultaneously think it's one of the most ridiculous shows out there. It's better on stage. It never should have been a movie. But as I moved into high school, I did start having some non-performance-based career dreams. Like fashion. Okay, I barely had any interest in fashion. It was very short-lived. But we had this fashion design kit thing when we were kids. I think it was one of my older sisters and it just got passed around to everyone. I pretty quickly stopped using all the stuff that it came with except the stencil, an outline of a human form. I gotta find some of these to show y'all, because of course I still have them all. But I really enjoyed coming up with the garments, at least on paper. So of course in the back of my head there was that question. Do you want to be a fashion designer? The thing is, I wasn't much different when I was a kid to how I am now. I already thought of clothing as being more about comfort than looks, which honestly does not mean you can't be a fashion designer, but like, I wasn't interested in fashion the way the world of fashion is often displayed to us. It didn't take me long, though, to meld my love of drawing out garments with my love of behind-the-scenes bonus features of movies. Costume designer! Yeah, this dream was entirely fueled by those special edition DVDs with a whole second disc full of bonus features. Yay! God, those were fun. I devoured the bonus features on movies like Peter Pan, Pirates of the Caribbean, Princess Diaries, Chronicles of Narnia, and eventually Lord of the Rings. And watching how the movies were made quickly became more interesting to me than watching the movies themselves. Like, the movie was just a reference for the behind-the-scenes features. I realized how many jobs there are on a movie set and how much work goes into stuff like the costumes for 100 extras in a battle scene. And yeah, part of me still wanted to be the actor, but the more practical side of me was kicking in with other options. Costume design is the thing that kind of stuck. It's not what I went to college for specifically, but it is the thing that I did the most in college and the first thing that I applied to grad school for, although by that point, I already kind of knew it wasn't the career I wanted to pursue. I already knew it wouldn't be right for me, and to be honest, I kind of knew that back in high school. I remember exactly when I realized it. I was watching the special features on the movie What a Girl Wants, and the costume designer was discussing the thought that she put into this specific outfit that Amanda Bynes wears. How the jacket would be something of her mom's that she had grabbed out of the closet when she left because she wanted to feel confident and look older. All this kind of stuff that was very, very interesting. But also, it was the first time that it hit home in my brain that the jeans, shirt, and jacket she was wearing, and indeed all of the normal modern day clothing in that entire movie, and in most movies and TV shows, had been costume designed. That's when I first really realized that being a costume designer meant choosing everyday clothing for modern day characters to wear in modern day movies. And like, I'm not downing on that at all. There is so much thought and care that goes into the choices behind the costumes in any movie and TV show, and that's an awesome job to have. It's one I'm still fascinated to watch and hear about. But I already knew at 16 years old that it wasn't one I was super interested in doing. I was dreaming of designing this kind of stuff and ignoring the reality of designing all this. I did briefly do some digging around on the internet at this point, trying to see, I don't know, the likelihood of jumping from square one to fantasy costume designer. The likelihood is low. But I found something about the role of a costume illustrator during that search. I still don't know if this is an actual role or like how commonly it's utilized, but it seemed to be a person who just does the drawings. Didn't have to make the costumes, not on that side of the whole process. And I was like, costume illustrator. I could do that. Or more accurately, I wouldn't mind doing that. It felt like something they'd only bother hiring if the costumes were elaborate, right? Unfortunately, I wasn't actually very good at costume illustration. I tried. I did this whole thing for practice during my high school years of boredom. I drew out the costumes for like all of the Chronicles of Narnia, even some of the extras. I think I also did Pride and Prejudice. I might have done some other movies as well. I can't even remember. Drawing the armor was tough. Anyway, long story slightly shorter in the world of costume design, I kind of got a renewed kick in the pants of this could be your career once I started college, especially because then I was looking more at the theatrical side rather than the film side. But that meant a lot of costume construction and, you know, sewing. And by senior year, as I was driving across the country to interview for costume design programs at graduate schools, I was like, I don't think I want to be a costume designer. I think it's one of those jobs where I just wanted to skip a bunch of steps and get to the end. It was a dream job as long as I didn't look at it too realistically. And I'm glad I did look at it realistically because, yeah, I don't think I would have enjoyed that career all that much. Instead, I figured I'd go into wig, hair, makeup, and prosthetic design, and I applied to grad school for that too. And that's a whole other story, but it also ended up going out the window after I very realistically considered what it would be like to do that job for the next 20 plus years. And then realized I didn't want to. I mean, that's the reality of so many of my dream careers. They were things that I wanted to try. And this is the issue that you run into when you're interested in so many things. You just want to try stuff. When you're faced with going beyond trying and actually doing it for an extended period of time, which also in turn usually means not doing everything else, it kind of changes everything. If you are a person who's always had one strong leading interest in the world of career options, kudos. That sounds so much easier. Or at least more straightforward. But ooh, y'all, we are not even close to done with careers that I considered. Jumping back to high school when I had plenty of time on my hands to dream up possibilities, my interest in behind the scenes of movies also spawned a desire to be a set decorator. This specifically came from watching the behind the scenes of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and reading the behind the scenes book that I had to go with it. I remember so specifically that it was the Beaver's home and then also Trumpkin's home in the tree in Prince Caspian that just, ooh, the details, the tiny little things filling the whole space and making it look lived in and cozy and fascinating. Yeah, when they said that's the job of a set decorator, I was like, oh ho ho! New career interest to add to the list. And I still think set decorating is awesome, even for modern day stuff. Like, you just have to fill a space with so many little things to make it look realistic and lived in. And somehow the thought that goes into that is a little more interesting to me personally than the thought that goes into, like, why a character put on jeans that morning. Also, okay, this is kind of a tangent, but I was listening to this podcast the other day. It's like the only one. Leaf in my coffee. Oh dear. It's like the only one I listen to. It's about screenwriting. You're okay. You'll be fine. And the two screenwriters who do it were talking about how they don't love it when people ask them to fully break down the behind the scenes of something, like explain where they got this idea or how this shot was set up and what the whole process was behind all of this. Like, both of them were kind of against behind the scenes. And they reasoned that it ruins the magic, or to be less Disney about it, the experience of the thing they created. As in, for them, it messed with the audience's perception of their work. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing this well, but it just stood out to me as so interesting because I'm on the totally opposite side. I have always personally adored behind the scenes of anything. Like, I'm fascinated to learn about how any job works beyond what the consumer or the outside person sees. But of course, like, even more so for the entertainment industry, just because, you know, that's where my biggest interest always lies. And then also, there's so much that goes into making entertainment that is behind the scenes, that the consumer is not supposed to see. And because I'm so fascinated in all of that, I tend to assume that everyone else is too, or at least that, like, every creator wants to share that, because I always want to share that. I love sharing behind the scenes stuff. But I was realizing listening to this that that is because I look at everything, at a movie or a TV show or a book or a song, as a thing that has been created. I see it as something that has been made, and therefore I want to know how it was made, because the more you know how it was made, the more you may realize that there's something in there in that process that you want to do. Like, I didn't know what a set decorator was until I saw behind the scenes stuff. And I think that people who are really immersed in the industry or who have been in it for a very long time kind of forget that there are people outside whatever industry they're in, quite frankly, that do not know anything about it, that don't have that subconscious knowledge of, like, yes, there's such a thing as a grip and a best boy and the prop department does this. And, like, they don't have any of that knowledge, and they won't have it unless you share about it. And so they won't ever know that that's a job they could have unless people share publicly that that's a job they could have. But then I have to admit that that means I, as a creator, am looking at my audience almost entirely as future or potential creators themselves, rather than as consumers. And the reality is that most of us are just consumers, and that's okay. That's what we should be when it comes to most art, at least. I don't know, it was just so funny to me because I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. Like, of course I realize that there are people who are not as interested in behind the scenes as I am, but I guess I hadn't specifically thought that there are people out there who wouldn't want to know or see behind the scenes stuff, because when they look at art, they see it just as the art that it is, whatever type of art that it is, and knowing more about how that was made actually mars that experience for them. Anyway, tangent over, moving on to career desires outside the entertainment industry that I had, because yes, there were a few of those. I have always loved food, and therefore the creation of food. There we go, same thing. I guess for me, if I love something, then I am inevitably interested in how that thing was created. So I had culinary school on my maybe list for a while, kind of fluctuating between culinary or patisserie. I think the thing that got me here was that I couldn't imagine working in a restaurant, at least not long term. My first experience with working in the food industry started freshman year of college, and then I worked many jobs related to food and beverage over the years that followed, during which I quickly discovered that seeing behind the scenes of food does kind of ruin it for me. I mean, even at like a gourmet restaurant, the juxtaposition between these beautiful plates of food and this industrial stainless steel kitchen just kind of throws me. And let me tell you, working at a college cafeteria just straight up made me not want to eat, so. But even in high school, before I had this experience, I think I could tell that the life of a chef in a restaurant wasn't gonna be right for me. No matter how much I love food, I mean, I also can't stand being yelled at, and like, there's still way too much yelling in kitchens, even nowadays. People take it very seriously. I could, however, imagine working at a delightful little bakery, or even more so, being a private chef. I think the private chef thing could have worked for me. Even now I'm kind of like, oh dang, maybe if like exploring food and making dishes and trying new recipes was your job, you do it more. Because I always enjoy cooking and baking in the end, once I actually convince myself to do it. It's just so time consuming. It's hard to devote the time to it when it's not your official job. And then off in totally new territory, I also considered being an ASL interpreter. I absolutely love sign language. It's such a beautiful form of communication to me, and let's be real, as someone who didn't realize that they were constantly overstimulated for so much of their life, I think I enjoyed being able to have a conversation in silence. So one of my older sisters was also interested in ASL, and for a while she was taking courses at the local community college, and she would come home and teach me whatever she had learned. Like, I would do her homework with her. This was probably junior high, like early teen years for me. We did get to the point of being lightly conversational in sign language. And one time she even took me with her to like a meetup that the students in this class had been encouraged to attend. It was a get-together for the deaf community at Starbucks, and we went and we were able to talk to some people. I actually got my name sign from a guy there, which is this. K for Kaylee, because I was still going by Kaylee back then. And then this was because he said, I have dimples when I smile. Anyway, I so enjoyed sign language that I was considering pursuing it further, and the thought of having a career in that field as an interpreter was really cool to me. In the end, I was hoping to do a good old simultaneous pursuit. Go to college for musical theater and get a minor in sign language, or at least take as many courses as possible. Unfortunately, I discovered upon registering for classes at my university that they did not offer ASL. Boo. Okay, and then we have this random little trio of driving jobs. Race car driver. I have not the slightest idea how you even get into that field, but yeah, it was a dream I had for a while. I like driving, and I like going fast. And I kind of like danger. Truck driver. This is one that still just kind of drifts through the back of my head every time I'm on a road trip. Again, I like driving. I like being alone. I like being in the car. I like traveling. There was a point where I thought, hey, truck driver, you could maybe enjoy that. You could be good at that. I am absolutely terrible with engines and such though, or rather I should say, I'm absolutely disinterested in them. And then chauffeur. In the movie Sabrina, she says to her father, I love that you became a chauffeur so that you could read. And she says it leaning against the doorframe of his room that is piled in books on every surface. When I watched that movie, I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. How do you become a chauffeur? Sign me up. Jobs that leave you with a lot of downtime where you just have to be somewhere but you don't really have to be doing anything and therefore you can read. Those have always been on my radar. And again, I like driving. I like being in the car, so chauffeur. I think that one could have worked for me. Now we get to real life though, life after college, when considering a career meant actually considering that career because you have to do something with your life and you need money to pay rent, so figure it out, honey. I did not figure it out. Hence the reason I've worked like 40 different jobs. This doesn't really count as a career, but I did look into applying to the Peace Corps. And then I did a bit of research and realized that they wanted people with like actual helpful skills and not freshly graduated theater majors. Sad day, but fair enough. So instead, while running around Iceland and running out of money, I chose between two careers that had always lightly interested me: flight attendant or cruise crew. As you may know, I ended up choosing cruise crew, but I did look into flight attendant quite heavily. The idea of flying around the world and getting paid to do so was exciting to me, and I'm honestly not entirely sure why I went the ship route instead. I remember being thrown off by the training for flight attendants. Like, my memory is telling me that it was unpaid, and therefore I was like, well, you can't do that because, as previously mentioned, I was running out of money. But that seems wild that training would be unpaid nowadays, or even 8 years ago. Is that a thing? Is anyone here a flight attendant? Later on, when we moved to New York, unaware that Broadway would shut down the day we arrived, I was planning to pursue the role of dresser. This was something I managed to graduate with a degree in musical theater, not knowing was a real job. Beyond doing costume construction and costume design, I also frequently worked wardrobe during the actual run of the shows backstage in college, which not only means fixing things that break as the shows go on and doing laundry, but it also meant doing quick changes on actors, prepping their costumes for them, and helping them get into those costumes in a very speedy manner. We even did Shrek my senior year, so I got to coordinate Fiona's change from a human to an ogre in, like, I don't know, it was something wild, like 47 seconds. And I was good at it. Like, I excelled at quick changing myself. During a production of Guys and Dolls, I was in the ensemble and I changed like 12 times throughout the show. And I had every single one of those changes down to the second. And I was equally good at coordinating and executing quick changes for other people. It was really fun for me. I think the organization side of my brain was like, ooh. So despite knowing that that was a thing that needed to be done in professional theater and on Broadway, I just hadn't really realized that it was a full-on actual job that people do for extended periods of time, also known as careers. So when we moved to New York, that was one of two fields that I was planning to pursue there. And then the state of the world said, nope. Another field I briefly looked into around that same time was what's called a coverage writer. Yet another job I discovered through some research somewhere along the road, but I don't know that most people know it exists. So production companies and talent agencies and writing contests, for that matter, get insane numbers of scripts sent to them. Way too many for anyone who actually works there to read. But also, if you never read scripts, then you're never going to discover any new talent. So they can outsource that job to a script reader or coverage writer. This person reads the script and then writes what is essentially a book report on it, according to like some specific standards depending on who you're doing it for. But like, that's basically it. If you were super into book reports, guess what? You could have a job writing them professionally. So when I discovered that job, I was like, hey, I like to read, I like to write, I like working from home. I should be able to just like dive into this little thing as a side job, right? No, that's not how it works. Once again, my desire to try a job with absolutely no slow buildup of experience was dashed upon the rocks. I couldn't just stroll my way into an online application with zero experience and zero examples. Darn. The actual second field that I was planning to pursue in New York, though, was casting. Did not happen while we were there in the grand old year of 2020, but I did pick back up with that pursuit when we moved to LA, and I worked a few contracts. Casting was the thing I really thought I was going to do. I had finally narrowed it down. I thought I would do well in this career. I thought I would enjoy this career. I had taken steps to get it started, and those steps were actually working. It just so happened that my first casting contracts overlapped with starting a YouTube channel. But I still thought casting first, and honestly, several years after it was clearly YouTube first, I still clung to my connection to the casting world, as though I might switch back to it at some point. It's only been very recently that I was like, oh honey, I don't think that's gonna happen. Because let's just get real on a slight side tangent here for a moment. The reason that I quit casting, although I didn't really know I was quitting it for good at the time, but also like I kind of did know I was quitting it for good, is that at the age of 30, with 12 years of work experience, in different fields, yes, but like all of it is related, and with 2 casting contracts just completed, I was asked to work for free because it would be good training experience for me. And I just thought, well, first of all, I thought, how dare you? Although Lord knows my passive-aggressive self didn't say that part out loud. But then I thought, if I'm gonna work for free, YouTube at that point was essentially working for free. I brought in about $200 a month for more than full-time hours. Then I'm gonna work for myself, doing what I want and what I love, being my own boss and setting my own standards and my own schedule and my own hours. Because at that point, I was simultaneously pursuing 2 different careers, and both of those careers were asking me to work for free, and neither of them were guaranteeing when I would be paid a living wage for my labor. And when I weighed them against each other, YouTube won. And there's definitely still a little bit of bitterness locked in my soul on the topic of working for free. Like, I could rant about it for a while. And it does get triggered sometimes on those rare occasions when someone comments something like, why are there so many ads on your videos? Or I feel cheated that you do sponsored segments when I pay for YouTube Premium. Or, this product review video feels like an infomercial. Yes, that's what a product review video is. And the ads and the sponsored segments and the infomercials are what allow me to pay my bills and to go to events and to buy supplies for future projects and to maybe take a day off every now and then and to invest in my future and in the future of the channel. And they help me not regret the day that I said no to working a casting contract for free and essentially ended my career right there. Like, I never heard from a casting director again. Granted, I stopped pursuing it very hard myself, so it is partially on me. I mean, a lot of other stuff helps me not regret it more, like the beautiful stories y'all tell me in the comments and getting to be a creative inspiration for people. But, like, making a livable wage off of my work after several years of doing it for free, it helps! I've actually been doing this full-time for 4.5 years now, which I constantly forget. And yeah, reality check. If I was still making $200 a month, I would have had to quit by now, or at least pull back massively to, like, very part-time hours and go get a job with a stable income. So, I don't know, I just thought that while talking about all of the careers that could have been, this is a good time to reiterate how grateful I am for the career that is. And that career is made possible by people watching, but also in less cuddly, delightful terms, it's made possible by advertising. So, thank you to the 99% of viewers, honestly it is most of you, who believe that content creators should be paid for creating the content that you enjoy, and who get that that payment comes from advertising, just like it has on TV for, as long as TV has existed. Can you imagine if every single one of my videos came with 8 to 9 minutes of ads that you could not skip or fast forward through? 'Cause that was a half hour of TV for a very long time. Anyway, this kind of brings us to the stuff that I still think I would be decent at or decently happy doing nowadays. Like casting. I wanted to work in casting for a long time, and I finally got there. And I didn't like it as much as I hoped I would, but I did like it. I think I would have enjoyed that career, although I will say, I had more fun doing background casting than like regular casting, aka casting the characters who have lines. Those two areas are totally different and quite separate within the industry, actually. I had a lot of fun casting extras, though simultaneously it was absolutely insane. I don't think I can even tell those stories yet. You know what I really think I would have done well in, though, is the publishing industry as an editor. I know, totally different field coming in here. I have a bit of informal experience, though, and I'm quite tough, as my poor sister can attest. But I really enjoy helping somebody work through their story and make it better. Or I could have just been a copy editor. I think I would have been good at that. We had very intense grammar courses. A lot of jobs I've been interested in over my adult years are kind of supporting other creative people through their journeys or on their careers, which I guess lightly translates to what I do here on YouTube. I think I'm most passionate about creativity and creative expression, and I've always wanted to help other people achieve their dreams or their goals in that area. There is one more career, or at least one more that I can think of, that I have always wanted to pursue, and I really do mean always here. This one goes even further back than acting. Writing. I mean, I've been a storyteller for as long as I can remember. I've been writing since I could first hold a pencil, and the joy of my desire to write is that it never has to stop being a dream, you know? Like, at this point, it's pretty safe to say that a career as an ice skater or a race car driver or even a set decorator is probably out. But writing is something I can do at any point, so it's never a dream of the past. It's always current. You know what's funny? There's that whole idea of like manifestation, speaking something out loud to make it happen. I've always felt directly the opposite. Like, the more I want something, the less likely I am to talk about it, as though speaking about it will somehow spoil it or make it absolutely certain to never come true. Not sure where that one stems from. That's something I'll have to muse about a bit more. But I was always so particular about when and with who I would talk about wanting to be a writer, because I was just so afraid that talking about it would ruin my chances. I don't know, just weird little thing about me. The really amazing thing is that I have theoretically, or statistically I suppose you could say, still only lived about a third of my life. So I tend to get overwhelmed by lack of time, by the perceived lack of time. And I think this is hard for me to overcome, not just because of the vastness of stuff that I want to do and try and experience, but also because it goes so far back. It started so early for me. I was aware from such a young age that time was passing me by and I was losing certain opportunities with every moment. Like, at some point, you can never be a child actor. It's too late. You are an adult. And I felt that waste of time very strongly. I know that sounds dramatic to say, and in the logical side of my brain, I'm always telling myself it wasn't a waste of time, you were being a child. But the feeling side of my brain can't really get past the fact that I was bored out of my mind with childhood, and I just wanted to do things. So the feeling side of my brain has trouble letting go of the term waste of time. I'm working on it. Because this feeling of time slipping away from me goes so far back, I'm always on edge a little bit, always thinking I need to do this now or I'll never be able to. And I frequently have to remind myself that, no, you don't. You have so much life left to live, again theoretically, and so many of these things that you wanted or want to do or try, you can still do or try. You have time. I mean, I've ended up with this very strange career path that wasn't even on my childhood radar because it wasn't really a thing back then. Who's to say where this will end up or what opportunities it will create? Like, will I be a YouTuber 20 years from now? I gotta say, probably not, right? I know my project list is endless, but a lot changes in 20 years. A lot changes in 2 years. So that's the cool thing to me that I frequently have to remind myself. Here's all these lives I could have lived, but also, here's all these lives I can live. I think if there's something you want to do in life, if there's something you've always wanted to try or experience, then don't delegate it to could have been. Leave it as can be. Some interests we grow out of, some dreams we move on from, and I think it's important to recognize that, to have that differentiation. But I don't know, here's some very cliche advice. Don't give up on your dreams! Seriously, if you're watching this video, then you ain't dead yet. And I think it's often easier for our brains to say, oh, here's this life I could have lived, instead of here's this thing I am still pursuing. Because, you know, pursuing things is hard. I guess I just wanted to remind myself and all of you that it might be worthwhile to look at that list of lives you could have lived and consider if you want to go after any of them. Maybe it'll look different than you originally imagined. Instead of playing the best friend in a Disney Channel show at the age of 12, maybe I'll get involved in community theater at the age of 35. But maybe it'll be more achievable than the panicky side of our brain wants us to believe at first glance. I think it's worth a try. Here's what we're working on today. I don't know if this video is out yet. Don't mind me just flopping. No regrets. Please hold while I try to tie a knot. Because I always had the opposite problem, I suppose. Although, ow! You have very sharp little claws. Oh my god, why am I feeling phantom furs? There it is, I just saw it. I got it. No, yard work. Way back in my childhood. I'm getting hungry. Oh my god, my stomach. Why you gotta be like that? To which Rhinona farts.